Carson Lebrecq here, Built Training Inc. I've helped over 1,000 people transform their physique and bring their best package to stage. Today, let's talk about the third course in the ultimate contest prep course, training. So, what's gonna be covered? Why proper training is important during prep? Which is the best training? How do I assess my training? What should my training actually be like? And how does training change during the course of the prep? And I'm also gonna go over 5 issues or common myths that people run into during contest prep training. Common issues, I wanna tone, so I'm gonna start using higher reps. Training volume does not directly relate to the condition of the athlete. 2, swapping movements in and out during prep to make training easier or harder. So training plan adjustments, they have a time and a place, but we're not just gonna randomly swap movements in and out when we feel like it. Training harder in prep is gonna give me the desired look on stage. Managing training output, it's far more complex than just redlining yourself every session. You gotta be able to manage fatigue carefully to keep training optimal. So that optimal training is gonna give the muscle a reason to stick around. I'm gonna superset weak body parts to hopefully bring them up before stage time. Adding in volume without an actually good reason during a contest prep, that's a mistake, man. You don't wanna be adding in more to recover from when we actually have less recoverability. Less equals more. I need to keep my loads as high as possible during prep. While heavy training is important, it's just one metric to keep an eye on, but it's not the only one. We don't want to sacrifice quality of execution to simply keep the weights heavy, okay? Common myth number 1, I want to tone so that I'm gonna start doing higher reps. I'm sure this is something that we all ran into during the start of our bodybuilding or fitness journey. It's been around a long time, it's simply not true. So training volume is not gonna directly relate to the condition of the athlete. The toning, the look that you're actually wanting to attain, it comes from a low body fat percentage. And that comes from a caloric deficit through a fat loss phase. So immediately adding in training volume during a prep or a fat loss phase, it's gonna exponentially increase the rate of fatigue that you're actually gonna accumulate. It's gonna lead to less muscle, it's not gonna lead to the look that you actually want. Simply adding in volume, it's not gonna magically get you leaner. So you just gotta remember, training is simply a stimulus to either make the body grow, retain, or atrophy muscle, not directly burn fat. Common myth number 2, swapping movements in during prep to make it harder or easier. So training plan adjustments, yes, they have a time and a place, but we're not just gonna randomly move exercises around. Here's the main reasons we're actually gonna swap exercises in and out. It's due to nervous system fatigue to keep stimulus quality as high as possible. So during prep, as the prep goes on, we're slowly gonna get more tired. Our training is gonna feel more laborious. The training quality is gonna start to suffer due to fatigue buildup. And this is gonna create an environment where some of these more demanding exercises could potentially cause an injury or drive you down to an area where you can't recover from. So movements are gonna be swapped from more axial loading movements. So things like barbell squats, deadlifts, RDLs even, we're gonna swap them for easier movements, ones that are gonna be either chest supported or just simply less strenuous on the nervous system so that we can keep the quality high. Here's an example. T-bar, we're gonna swap it out for a chest supported horizontal row. So it's gonna be the same target muscles, they're still getting stimulated. We're not gonna have to control the load by staying bent over. That's what's gonna control fatigue management through exercise selection. Common myth number 3, training harder in prep is gonna give you the desired look that you want on stage. So managing training output, it's more complex than just redlining yourself. Yes, we wanna be training hard, of course, but we want to keep our training in an optimal place where we can recover from. This is something I see all the time. You know, competitors, they start a prep and they get excited. Awesome, I love that you're excited for a show, but suddenly giving the body more to actually recover from, that's not a good idea. So take that excitement, hold it, use it as a flame, but don't use it as a training intensity technique. When we're talking about this created recovery issue. This is gonna create a demand that the body is gonna accrue a bunch of fatigue at a super fast rate. It's actually gonna lead to you either needing a deload week, a diet break, or even potentially moving show dates because we're having to slowly pull out of this or add too many deloads in that you're just not gonna make it in time. So training intensity, it should stay constant until it's not recoverable anymore. And then the actual benefit is gonna be decreasing the intensity to actually keep training quality high and constant. Common myth number 4, I'm gonna superset weak body parts to either bring them up or keep them strong during prep. So adding in volume without an actual reason, I wanna just keep adding volume in because you're simply not in a place to recover already. And now you're adding in more for the body to recover from. So you're gonna be creating this deficit of recovery. So yes, frequency, it's important to keep in mind, but adding in arms to every workout is actually gonna do the opposite of what you want. Instead of your arms being big and full and growing, they might actually shrink because they're not recovering. Actually focus on executing the current volume that's set at a super high efficiency. Make it perfect. And that's what's gonna give you the outcome that you want. Common myth number 5. I need to keep my load as high as possible during prep. While wanting to keep our load high, it's an important thing to keep in mind, but it's not the only thing. It's one metric. So we don't want to sacrifice all these other metrics just to keep the weights as heavy as possible. This is going to put us in an environment where we could potentially get hurt. We actually want to focus on all of these as equally as we can. Intensity, frequency, volume, tempo, and recovery. Let's jump into the meat and potatoes. Why is proper training important? Training in bodybuilding, it's not about just getting a pump or putting the muscles, through motion. We want to create a stimulus for the body to retain muscle tissue. Proper training is going to lead to more and a better looking muscle when we get on stage. And training, it's about finding the right amount of stimulus without causing a bunch of unneeded stress. The big takeaway here, training is more complex than just ticking boxes. Proper training creates enough of a stimulus for the body adapt to, but not to go into an emergency for. What is the best training plan? So the best training plan is one that's actually gonna carry over from your off season. You're gonna set yourself up on a long-term plan throughout the off season. It's gonna give us data on how your body recovers, grows, or potentially gets beat up. That's why working long-term with a coach is super beneficial. It's just the same principles, just applied in prep. So don't change everything simply because you're eating a little less food. Changes are actually gonna happen periodically throughout prep when they're needed. The takeaway here, we want to choose the right training plan that's going to create a stimulus for muscle retention. We don't want to throw away a plan that's currently working in the off season just because one day in the calendar changed. We're just going to do one small tweak at a time. Here's the key. Make a change, analyze what that change did before making another one. That leads into the next topic, how to assess if your training actually needs to be changed at all. So we're gonna run an assessment. Number 1, we're gonna do a strength assessment. Are we losing strength from just one exercise or one body part? Or is it systemic? Is the whole body losing strength? Is it just our leverages changing from losing weight? 2, exercise-specific fatigue management. So do we swap exercises in and out as training variables change? Movements might not actually be completely swapped out, but you can actually move them later in the session so that the load doesn't have to be as much and it's not going to be as much bracing on some of these movements. Another important thing, number 3, biofeedback. What is the client telling you? What days do you feel most taxed on? Which exercises do you feel most taxed on? And what does the rest of your life look like right now? That leads into lifestyle management. So what's your environment like at home? What's your environment like at work? Are you sleeping? Are you losing weight? Are you gaining weight? Are you losing fat? It's very hard to get certain people in shape, especially when we're talking about, shift workers, blue collar guys. This can be difficult because of schedule irregularity. What is the environment like? So, Carson, what should my training be like? So, like I said, training doesn't just magically change when we start prep. We're gonna go into prep with a plan already put together with recovery limits that were set in the off season. The training is fully dictated on your recovery capacity. What's gonna affect that recovery capacity? How do we know what it is? Genetics, training intensity, frequency, lifestyle, PEDs. versus a natural athlete. What PEDs are we using? What is the dosages we're using? What's the needed rate of loss to get on stage? What's your cardio like? What's your lifestyle like? What's stress like? Stim usage, what's your volume like when you're training? There's so many metrics to look into, and they need to be assessed not only throughout prep, but through the off season to be able to collect enough data. So we want to be focusing on quality stimulus primarily, because simply adding more of the shitty stuff that's not working is just going to continue to make that snowball go down the hill. Training, the big takeaway, training is going to be adapted to an individual's needs. Everyone is going to be slightly different. There's going to be slightly different metrics that need to be played around with. But to really sum it up, you just want to train as hard as you can as long as you're recovering. How does training change during the different phases of prep? Pre-prep, generally this is when we're going to start pulling out CNS fatiguing movements. You're going to swap them out for ones that are going to be easier from a nervous system perspective, but still hitting the target muscles. We're at the front end of prep. This is when we're going to start to really set up your training split, your training plan, and making sure that you are recovering from it. Middle of prep, this is when we're going to start managing factors like volume, frequency, intensity, and really swapping out axial movements, ones that are loading, so that we can swap them out for things that are a little bit easier. Now we're at the end of prep. So now we just want to keep a quality stimulus without causing a huge nervous system fatigue or a bunch of unwanted inflammation. Peak week. What's the goal of peak week with training? We want to get the right amount of training in. We want to keep these muscles fresh, healthy, full, and we don't want to create a bunch of inflammation. The takeaway here, each stage of prep has a goal, and it's a great framework, but there's no hard set rules. Some people can go their entire prep without switching movements in and out. Some, you're switching movements in and out pretty often. The better you can manage each phase, the better the final outcome is going to be. What is the takeaway of this whole course here? Training is simply going to give the body a stimulus to adapt to, with our ideal outcome being retained muscle with minimal fatigue. It's really that simple. Each individual, you're going to be treated as an individual. Not every prep is the same. Not every athlete is the same. Not every training plan needs to be set for that athlete. There's no formula for this. The more data that you have through each phase, the better you can kind of make these adjustments going forward. You just got to remember, a simple plan executed perfectly is going to work way better than a complex plan executed poorly. If you're interested in learning more about contest prep management, reach out to me to take your training to the next level. You can find me on Instagram at Carson Lebrecq or at Built Training Inc. You can shoot me an email, builtbycarson@gmail.com, or you can head over to the website, www.builttraininginc.com. Have a fantastic day and keep getting jacked.